I request all of you to kindly take your seats so that we can begin with the proceedings. Please clear the aisles and please take a seat. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of ASSOCHAM, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to the National Conference on Warehousing, Leasing, Investment and Development. I'm Manisha Nair Dhawan, your host for the day. Now, ever wondered how that t-shirt you ordered on Amazon arrived at your doorstep in Delhi, all the way from Tirupur in just the promised 3 days? How millions of these e-commerce transactions are being successfully done? Of course, there are powerful algos that help in order fulfillment, but without a warehouse, there would be a big hole in the supply chain. So today, we're going to talk about a lot about warehousing, but just a few house announcements before we go ahead. For an uninterrupted and enjoyable experience, I would request all of you to please turn your mobiles on silent to turn them off. And if there is any urgent call that you need to take, please step outside and take the call. Once again, I would request all of you to please clear the aisles and sit down. You will have ample opportunity to catch up with all your friends here. We would like to kickstart the proceedings with the lighting of the ceremonial lamp. For an auspicious start to the event, I would request our esteemed dignitaries to please come forward and light the ceremonial lamp. I would request Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar, Chairman, Warehousing Development and Regulatory Authority, to please come and light the lamp, and I would request our other dignitaries to join him as well. Shri Hitendra Mehta, Co-Chair, National Council on SEZs, Industrial Parks and Warehousing, ASSOCHAM. I request him to join in. Please put your hands together and welcome our dignitaries. Shri Anesh Shukla, Chief Customer Officer, Wellspan 1 Logistics Park, and Mr. E.R.S. Bharadwaj, Deputy Director General, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, to please come ahead and light the lamp. The light of the lamp leads us from darkness towards light. The flame symbolizes wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge removes ignorance, just as the light removes darkness. Thank you all for this auspicious beginning to the conference. I would request you all to please take your respective seats on the dais. So I would welcome on stage Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar, Chairman, Warehousing, Development and Regulatory Authority. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar on stage. I would request the other dignitaries to please join him. Shri Anesh Shukla, Chief Customer Officer, Wellspan 1 Logistics Park. Shri Hitendra Mehta, Co-Chair, National Council on SEZs, Industrial Parks and Warehousing, ASSOCHAM, would request you to please join us. We have some other dignitaries also joining us, but we know because of the rain, traffic is bad. They're on their way. They'll be joining us soon. Right. We are very honored and privileged to have our esteemed dignitaries joining us. So I would request Shri Hitendra Mehta, Co-Chair, National Council of SEZs, Industrial Parks and Warehousing, ASSOCHAM, to please present a small token of our appreciation and gratitude to Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar, Chairman, Warehousing Development and Regulatory Authority, for joining us here, sparing the time and coming here to share their knowledge with us. Thank you so much, sir. Right, and like I said, the warehousing industry in India is largely unorganized and still in its nascent stage. India has the lowest warehouse capacity with modern facilities when compared to the rest of the world. This offers ample opportunities for investment in this sector, and during the National Conference on Warehouse, leasing, investment, and development, we'll be discussing the warehousing trends, regulatory perspectives, and investment opportunity in this sector. So at the outset, let's get an industry view on how it's really like on the ground. I would like to request Shri Shukla, Chief Customer Officer, Wellspun One Logistics Parks, to please address the audience. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri Shukla.
Morning, everyone. Esteemed dignitaries. Feels good to be amongst real faces. We've gone through a phase where, can you hear me and am I audible, kind of, we've had enough of those kind of sessions. But good to see physical presence, good to see good numbers, and again, supply chain enthusiasts. So very happy to see you all, and thank you for inviting me. Obviously, everyone is aware of the post-COVID scenario where we've seen supply chain kind of shoot off the roof, right? We are a billion-plus population, which is a very consumption-driven economy. And needless to say, the consumption-driven economy needs a continuous feeding across, and supply chain has played a very, very vital role. Through the COVID, even before COVID, but I think COVID scenario has really kind of given a very heavy, significant prominence to the supply chain sector. If I have to kind of give you some numbers, we are growing at around over 10.5%. The logistics industry itself is over $200 billion in India, growing very, very fast, right? I mean, it's one of the fastest growing sectors. Amongst the real estate asset class, if I have to say, the commercial asset class is probably the most lucrative in terms of the numbers. But if I look at the fastest growing asset class, warehousing asset class is one of the fastest growing. And again, post-COVID, we've seen that advent, the numbers really shooting up significantly on the higher side. Right? Almost $1 billion worth of institutional investment has come into warehousing sector through the last year itself, right? So that's a very, very high number, given that it's a very nascent stage of warehousing. If I give you, again, share some numbers with you, we've seen over almost about 40 million square feet of absorption that is expected in this year, close to 35 million square feet of absorption that happened through the last year. And what's very interesting to note is almost about 8.5 million square feet out of that 35 million is coming in from tier 2 cities. So I think that's where the growth story of India really lies, right? We're seeing not only the top 8 metro cities grow at the phenomenal pace, but the pace of growth is equally catching up in the tier 2 cities. And I think that's predominantly because we've seen the urban population go back to the tier 2 cities, operating out of their home cities and hometowns through the COVID times. And I think that's helped the internet, really, the penetration of internet, data mining, everything, all those factors has led up to a lot of e-commerce growth across. How does this really translate into a warehousing sector, right? I mean, we've seen that warehousing will continue to play a significant role into supply chain itself. So while the government plays a very, very vital role in improving the connectivity, the Bharat Mala initiatives, the highway initiatives that we've seen, and that's really led to a significant growth across new micro markets from a warehousing perspective. But the tier 2 cities will always continue to grow that phase because of the connectivity, improved connectivity that we have, right? So the Gati Shakti initiative, we've seen almost 25,000 kilometers being built up. We're going to see multimodal parks being built up. And I think that's going to play a very, very vital role in the supply chain and the logistics and the warehousing sector grow significantly in the next 5 years that we see. How does this translate, like I said, to the warehousing part of it? Warehousing as such, if you see, 20 years back when I started my career, we didn't even probably have a word called warehousing. We probably had what we call as a godown or a shed. The biggest warehouses were close to about 100,000 square feet or 1 lakh square feet, 1.5 lakh square feet, right? Today we are seeing average warehouse sizes across most of the metro cities to the tune of 3 lakh, 4 lakh, 5 lakh square feet, right? I mean, that's a significant change that we're seeing across the industry, across the sector. The standard warehouses those days, again, were a few years back, were not more than 7 meters, 8 meters high. Today, we are seeing 12 meters, 14-meter high warehouses, which is becoming a very standard norm. And I think that's where the paradigm shift is happening from the industry, from the consumer space, everyone. That warehousing is not just the space utilization, but it's also the cube utilization. And I think that's where the vital role comes in from the industry, from the sector. Now, while the warehouses are becoming bigger and better, how do we kind of manage that efficiently also starts playing a very vital role. And that's where the automation comes in eventually. Right? We're starting to see an advent of automation to improve productivity, to improve efficiency, to improve the operational speed. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we all are seeing where we order something, we get it within a day, you get it within an hour, or this 90 minutes and 120-minute delivery. All of this has to be technologically driven. And while you have a technology on the app side, there is a significant technology that plays in the back-end side to make sure that the warehouses are able to deliver those items, those goods that we order in the shortest possible time. So I think automation will continue to play a significant role going forward. And we are a billion-plus population, right? So automation is not to replace the people, but it's probably to enable the people. I mean, that's where the vital change from the industry is expected, that we are not just going to be a very heavy manpower-driven warehousing sector, but more of a very efficiently driven warehousing sector, right? So I think automation will continue to play a significant role. What's more important going forward now, and the challenge that the industry and the sector faces really, is the fact that there is a lack of standardization from a warehousing point of view across the country, right? I mean, we are seeing a grade B, grade C kind of warehouses, not just in terms of the quality, but also in terms of the compliances. And I think that's where, as an industry, as a statutory compliance perspective, we all really have to collectively come forward and ensure that there's a standardization of warehouses. There's standardization of norms of the warehouses. When we call something like a grade A warehouse, what does qualify as a grade A is something that we all have to collectively jot down and ensure. And I think I've seen a lot of work being done there. There are a lot of handbooks being kind of made across. There's a lot of representation being made to the government on that. And I wouldn't be surprised if the day is not very far where we'll really start seeing a lot of compliances and the standardization of warehousing being coming across. Because a grade A warehouse is not just at the building level, right? I mean, it has to be at your park level. You have to start ensuring that what is the level of automation or support that goes into the park level in terms of the traffic flow. So for example, when we at Wellspun One, we start designing a warehouse, we are designing warehouses which are not for today, but which are for 5 years from now, say 10 years from now. We are looking at facilities, a very simple example if I give. The trucking industry today is also evolving, right? We have standard vehicles that we see are 32 feet vehicles, but we will eventually start seeing 40 feet and 50 feet plus vehicles. Now, if the parks that we design today are not equipped to handle the vehicles of tomorrow, eventually it's going to lead towards the same bottleneck that we see. So I think the grade A parks are not just the building level, but also at a park level. And that's a very vital differentiation that we all have to bring in. And that's where, again, the standardization that we're talking about has to really come into play. So I think from an industry point of view, I believe that there is a lot of thrust, a lot of focus, a lot of exciting times that we see forward for the warehousing sector. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges. We really have to kind of pull up our socks to make sure that the growth is supported in a positive way, in a regulated way, in a way that we all are safe, compliant, and keeping that in mind, I think it's good to see you all. I look forward to a very fruitful session with all of you, and look forward to interacting with you. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, technology is required everywhere, but something that really heartens everyone is that this sector, logistics, is employing so many people and creating so many opportunities for Indians. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar, the Chairman, Warehousing Development and Regulatory Authority. I welcome him to please give the keynote address. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar.
Dignitaries on the dais, Shri Anay Shukla, Mr. Hitendra Mehta, and dignitaries of the dais. It's indeed a pleasure to see such a decent gathering in this, amidst all this traffic jam we have been facing today morning. I had a difficult time coming here, and I'm sure all of you have braved this thicket of traffic and have come here. So I think I'm indeed grateful that we are able to assemble such a august gathering here today. So at the very outset, let me first congratulate ASSOCHAM for having organized this workshop on warehousing, leasing, investment and development. It's indeed a very exciting thing they are doing. It's a great thing. And as Mr. Shukla had mentioned in his speech just now, which I listened to with very great interest, there is a lot of potential in this warehousing business. It is about to take off. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised, very happy to hear of the kind of investment that he expects to flow into this sector. $1 billion is a lot of money. And the various growth opportunities in the tier 2 sectors, which signifies a major step forward for India. So this is something that augurs good, and ASSOCHAM, I would say, is organizing this conference, this workshop at the right moment. I also noted one point which he mentioned in his speech about the lack of standardization in the sector. I'll come to it in my speech by and by. And this was indeed a point that I was happy that this had come up early in the session, so that this could also be discussed when you have your discussions down the line. Now, I think since some of the guests have not been able to come today, some of the speakers, I will take slightly longer than what has been allotted to me. Kindly, I crave your indulgence if I meander a little bit too much, but I thought that having such a good audience, I should share whatever I had in mind. Now, since I'm representing the regulator, I've been working with this regulator for the last 3 years, first as Joint Secretary, then I retired there. I retired as Special Secretary in the WDRA, and then government appointed me as Chairman last year in November. And so I will speak from the regulator's perspective, what we think about what's happening in the sector and what we should do. Just like we heard Mr. Shukla, who has talked from the industry perspective, and he has given us some deep insights, I think this is a good opportunity for me to share on what we see it from the regulation side and what we see it from the government side. The first issue that comes across is the need for a regulator. Does the sector really require a regulator? What was the need? Now, Mr. Shukla had answered this question. He did mention that standardization is required, some kind of regulation is required. He mentioned that the sector is unorganized. It is a bit fragmented. So perhaps there is a need for a regulator to cure this malaise about being unorganized, being fragmented, and so on. But more important than that, I would think that the Indian experience with regulation is that whenever a regulator has been put in place and the regulator has done his job, the results have been spectacular. Let me just give 2 examples which I'm sure all of you in this room would be fully aware of. The first example is SEBI. You know, the stock market existed for a long, long time. If my memory serves me right, the stock exchange was first started in 1875 in Bombay. But the regulator came only in the early 90s, and 1991 or 92, if my memory serves me right. But what happened after the regulator came in? The stock market, which was restricted to a few individuals, and a few business individuals and traders and so on, suddenly boomed. There was a huge interest in trading in stocks and shares, and the market capitalization of companies and the number of shares traded went up. It became a very, very ordinary affair across the country to talk about the stocks and shares. The Sensex was well short of the 5,000 mark when the 90s started, and then it suddenly started going up. It crossed 20,000, and now we know where it is. So it was a great story. A similar story has happened in the insurance sector also. This is perhaps not that well known, but after IRDAI was founded, it has done a lot of good work in consolidating the sector and streamlining the various schemes, and it has benefited not just the public, but it has benefited the various insurance companies also. So these are good examples of how, if a regulator is in place, things could actually improve. I know the regulator is a bit like a policeman, and nobody really likes to be controlled or regulated. The words itself sound a bit scary. Who would like to be regulated by somebody else or monitored by somebody else? But let me assure you that in a business sector, the regulator would essentially work to help the promoters do fair business. It would also lay down standards. It would do some kind of monitoring. It would, I don't want to use the word control, but it would look at governance issues. It would set up benchmarks. It would set up entry and exit standards. The one obvious sector that would benefit hugely from a regulator are the customers. Like in the case of WDRA, the real beneficiaries are the depositors who would put their stocks in the warehouses. They can rest assured that the warehouses are of standard and the stocks are safe. Another set of people who would benefit from WDRA regulation would be the bankers who give their loans against stocks deposited in the warehouses. They would know that in case there is some problem, there would be regulations in place which insist on insurance, which insist on security deposits and so on, insist on net worth and so on, so that in the case of something going wrong, they would not lose their money. But having said all this, it's not just the depositors or the bankers who would benefit. I would say that the warehousing industry as a whole would benefit. There would be standards put in. There would be, you would know how to go about doing it, what would be the infrastructural standards, what would be the standard operating procedures, and this would help the industry to consolidate itself and move ahead in a homogeneous manner. So again, now a few words about how this regulation came into being. I think it's essential to share it on how the Warehousing Development Regulatory Act was passed in 2007 and how the authority was set up in 2008. We have been toying with the idea of warehousing regulation for a very, very long time. There was a Royal Commission on Agriculture, because most of the warehousing was in agriculture sector, in 1928. In 2004, much later, there was a National Commission on Farmers known as the Swaminathan Committee on Agriculture. Both of these talked about warehousing in agri-products in a big way. Recently, the Dalwai Committee, which talked on, it looked into doubling farmers' income, also gave a lot of importance to warehousing. But a very important committee report was in 2005 when the RBI brought out a report on warehousing receipts and pledge financing against warehousing receipts. And they did mention that the use of negotiable warehousing receipts was of great success in the United States. It helped farmers to liquidate stocks across the country. It helped them to connect them with markets and so on. And they said that there was need for a similar kind of system in India. And that is how the Warehousing Regulatory Act of 2007 was passed. And this authority was set up. Now, the question is, what exactly does WDRA do? To put it in a nutshell, what we do is that we register warehouses. Right now, registration is not mandatory. It is mandatory only for those warehouses which have to issue negotiable warehouse receipts, which are a bit different from ordinary warehouse receipts. A negotiable warehouse receipt is a receipt that has been checked by a third party, and therefore it forms a good document of title, and it can be endorsed from one person to another without any fuss. Now, what does WDRA do? It insists that the warehouses which are registered with us are according to a certain standard in terms of physical infrastructure. They have to be built according to FCI or CWC or BIS norms. It also insists that the stock holding should accurately reflect what is assured in the receipts issued by the warehouseman. The warehouseman has issued a receipt for 1,000 tons of wheat. He should have 1,000 tons of wheat of the quality which he mentions there. So it assures the sanctity of the receipt to anybody who buys it, or to a banker who pledges money against it, who gives a loan against it. we do a series of inspections to ensure that the sanctity of the receipt is there, to ensure that goods which are underlying the receipt are of the same quantity and quality. We also ensure that the concerned warehouseman follows a standard operating procedure which is prescribed by us or which he has built up himself and it's approved by us, so that the goods are kept safe. The agri products in particular have to be fumigated, they have to be kept in a particular stacking pattern, there has to be a lot of safety measures taken for that. We ensure that this is also done by the warehouseman, so that at the end of the day, when the person comes with the receipt to collect his goods, he finds that the goods are there indeed of the same quality and quantity. So all we are doing is to insist on a certain kind of standard for running the business. Now this is not very surprising. Now if you have to drive a car, if you have to get a license, I mean the state insists that you know how to drive. If you have to manufacture a car or a vehicle, certain standards are there. So if standards are there for all economic activities, so it is not, I mean, it's hardly surprising that there should be no standards for warehousing. Warehousing should also have these standards. And as I was mentioning earlier, the introduction of these standards would help the sector, which would take it out of this present scenario of being disorganized or being fragmented and so on, and it would be of help not only to the clientele, the depositors and the bankers, but also to the warehousing sector as a whole. Now, having said this, let me make one more point. We realize fully well that warehousing is a business. You are in it to create wealth, you have to generate a profit, you have to have margins. I understand that margins in the agri sector are not very good. We don't at the moment register FMCG and other warehouses, so I'm not aware of that. We are going to register warehouses which keep base metals and alloys. Government has just given permission, the notification has just come out. Now, in all these warehouses, it is important that these standards are maintained, and these the way the warehouses are kept, it is done as per a laid down pattern. Now, another point I'd like to make now is that, which I'm very fond of saying everywhere, is that warehousing is not just about storage. Warehousing has got a lot of other subsidiary activities, particularly in the agri sector. There is scope for value addition by grading the goods, by packing the goods, by making sure that you can get more money by selling these goods because certain value has been added to it. But there is one more activity which is of great concern to us, which I think is a key to the whole thing, that is pledge financing. If the goods are lying in the warehouse, there is definitely scope for the farmer or the trader who has kept the goods there to pledge it to a bank and get money for his immediate needs. Now, this is very important for a farmer particularly, because farmers do resort to distress sale at the time of the harvest when prices come down. And you can see marked variation of prices in India, in the sense that during the harvest the prices are quite low, and after that you find the prices going up. So if a farmer is able to take pledge finance by using the goods deposited in his warehouse, then he can avoid selling when the prices are low. He can avoid selling when there is a glut in the market. This is something that we must all endeavor and make sure that there is more pledge financing which is coming which comes to the country, and where more farmers could take loans against it. Now, if you look at the pledge financing scenario today, it is not very encouraging. In fact, the NSSO 70th round survey says that 40% of the population is still to get institutional credit. So where does the farmer get his credit from? He gets a credit mainly from money lenders, middlemen and so on, who charge him very high rates of interest, which is not really fair. If he can get a loan from a public sector bank or a private sector bank, he'll get it at a much more reasonable rate. Now the point I'd like to make is that if there are WDRA registered warehouses, the banks would definitely have a greater belief. They can rest easy knowing that this is a receipt where there is a certain sanctity attached to it, because the stocks have been inspected by a government agency, the warehouse is according to a particular standard, the stocks are being kept according to particular standards. Therefore, pledge financing should be easier. Now, what is the size of the pledge financing market in the country? what I understand is that it varies between 30 to 40,000 crores, which is not a very, very high figure. But on the other hand, the total size of the agricultural credit market in the country is around 18 lakhs. So there is more pre-harvest financing than post-harvest financing. Pre-harvest financing has its place. It's very, very important. It's important for the farmer to get money for his inputs and so on. But spare a thought for the fact that post-harvest financing is also really, really important, because that is going to get the farmer a better return for his money because he can delay his sale. And this is going to be one of the keys, one of the important factors for increasing the farmer's income, if not doubling it. And what does it hold for the warehousing sector? Because the topic of today's workshop is investment, leasing and development. Now, clearly, as Mr. Shukla had also pointed out, warehousing is now moving to tier 2 cities. Now, warehousing, if you ask me, it should move from tier 2 cities right to the farm gate. It should go to where the farmer can readily store his stocks. And if you have a system of negotiable warehouse receipts which are guaranteed by various inspections, etc., and so on, and the lending against these receipts go up, there will definitely be an incentive to create more warehouses at the farm gate level, and this would open a greater business opportunity for people who want to invest in this sector. So I would say that there is every need for us to increase the pledge financing for post-harvest loans and to register more warehouses under WDRA for giving this electronic negotiable warehouse receipts for goods stocked against these warehouse receipts, and getting more loans to people who are farmers, traders and so on. Now, I think this is something which I'd like to post before this audience, and I would request you to think about this and so on. Now, having been given this opportunity to address you, I can't let go of the fact just to share some thoughts about my organization, how it is doing. You would be interested in knowing that. We are on a growth path. We had registered about 1972 warehouses last year. We are up to 2,800. We hope to cross much more this year. It's a very good growth rate. Now, of course, we don't have much of the warehousing market. If you look at this figure, the market, I understand, is about 1 lakh of warehouses, out of which 40,000 would be captive warehouses or third-party warehouses. So out of that, there are about 3,000 warehouses registered with us. But the good news is that the figures are going up. And since I took charge in November, I have been paying special attention to pledge financing. The year before last, about 500 crores odd rupees were loaned against pledge financing against WDRA's receipts. Last year, the figure was 1,450 crores, which is a very, very significant jump. And this year, the first quarter, we have already crossed 600 crores in terms of pledge financing. So the pledge financing market is going up. We are able to convince the banks to loan against a digital receipt. This is something which we would like the help of organizations like SOCHAM also to deepen and widen this market so that this becomes really useful, and the net result would be benefit to the farmers and also to the business community, so that more warehouses get created in this country. There is more investment in this in this sector, and we have warehouses which are of standard and which follow standard procedures, not only in the tier 2 cities but also in the tier 3 cities and in the farm gate. And this whole complaint about the warehousing sector being disorganized and fragmented will become a thing of the past, and where we can proudly say that, look, India has got a good backbone of warehousing too. In fact, the first speaker had mentioned that, look, we are slightly behind as far as the warehousing sector is concerned. Now, why should this be so? I think the time has come for us to modernize it. Time has come for us to have good standards, good procedures, so that we are second to none. And that is where, gentlemen, as I think that the regulator can play a role, and I look forward to your support in this matter. Now, to conclude, I would say that having a regulator, again, I'll come back to this need for regulation. Having a regulator is similar to constructing a high-speed corridor. I mean, it is very costly. You'll have to invest money. People will crib that, you have to pay taxes to make this road. But once it is done, everybody finds it easy and great fun to zip along a highway in his car. So there would be a certain cost associated with regulation. There would be money for making standard warehouses and following procedures. But the net result, ladies and gentlemen, believe me, would be happiness all around. And it would be good for everybody, the business, the farmer, the banker, the trader, and so on. And we are at your service. I would like to continue this association with ASSOCHAM, and I'm sure that we can do great things in the coming months. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this very patient hearing during my long and meandering speech. As I said earlier, I had craved your indulgence. Now all the speakers are also in place, so I have managed to grab a few minutes, I would say illegitimately, but having done it, I'm quite happy about it. Thanks for hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, warehousing is something that touches so many sectors and so many lives, and our fingers are all crossed it's going to be good all around. We are very, very honored and privileged to have with us our chief guest, Shri Amrit Meena, Special Secretary, Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Big round of applause for our chief guest for taking the time to come here and join us. I would now request Shri Jasjeet Sethi, Chairman, National Council on Logistics, ASSOCHAM, and CEO, TCI Supply Chain, to please welcome our chief guest, Shri Amrit Meena. We are very grateful to you, sir, for taking the time out to come here and share your knowledge with all of us. Now, we are delighted and fortunate to have our esteemed dignitaries with us today on stage, and I would like to take this opportunity of their presence to release the knowledge paper by ASSOCHAM GLL, and this knowledge paper provides an insight into the state of warehousing in the country. So I would request all our dignitaries to please do the honors and release this knowledge paper. Each one of them will get a copy, and I would request all of you to please release this knowledge paper. Big thank you to all our dignitaries on stage. Shri Amrit Meena, Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar, Shri Jasjeet Sethi, Shri Hitendra Mehta, Shri Anesh Shukla, and Shri Devashish Datta from JLL, who is joining us on stage. Now, we're all very busy and pressed for time. We are very, very grateful to Shri Amrit Meena for taking the time to come here. So, without any further ado, I would request our chief guest, Shri Amrit Meena, Special Secretary, Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, to please address the audience. Big round of applause. Please welcome Shri Amrit Meena.
Thank you. Distinguished panelists, respected Shri Manoj Kumar sir, dear participants, I am sorry to have been late because of the traffic around. I am grateful to ASSOCHAM for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to you on this seminar on warehousing, leasing, investment and development. You know, logistics cost has broadly 4 components. PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan has been launched last year by Honorable Prime Minister with an objective to reduce the logistic cost. The component of the cost: transportation, warehousing, inventory, system and processes. In PM Gati Shakti, on all the 4 components of cost, there are concrete action plans and targeted deliverables. As per the latest estimation 2017 study, the cost of logistics in India is estimated to be about 13% of the GDP, whereas in developed countries it is estimated to be about 8%. So through PM Gati Shakti, this margin of 5% is intended to be checked so as to bring competitiveness of our manufacturing sector. For transportation side, the National Master Plan under PM Gati Shakti is aiming at improving the transport infrastructure across all modes of the transportation. You are aware that the express highways, greenfield corridors, dedicated freight corridors, inland waterways, port modernization, connectivity of ports, multimodal connectivity is being taken up on large scale, and the average speed of travel between important economic zones is being monitored to see that there are improvement in terms of the time and cost. We have been monitoring the movement of the containers for last 6 years and regularly monitoring the dwell time of the containers at the port and also the transit time from the ports to the hinterland. And there are reports, there are figures which proves that over the years there are significant improvement in these parameters. Now, the other component of the cost is the warehousing, for which under PM Gati Shakti, as Manoj Kumar sir has just mentioned, the need for having the standards in consultation with the Bureau of Indian Standards, Warehousing Regulatory and Development Authority, and also with the Warehouse Association of India and other stakeholders, keeping the global practices in view, the standards have been developed and are under deliberation, and we are very shortly likely to come out that standards handbook which prescribed for standards in warehousing, palletization, racking systems, and also the IT related management systems of the warehouses. Hopefully, once those standards are out and also with the supportive policies, you may be aware of that in January when this PM Gati Shakti was launched and subsequently review was carried out of the logistics policies of the state, because unless there are policy framework, bringing in regulations, bringing in standardization is difficult. So we reviewed and found that there were only 3 states which had the state warehousing and logistics policies. Continuously, DPIIT has coordinated with the state governments, given them a standard template. We shared the policies formulated by the states of Tamil Nadu, Haryana, Gujarat and Maharashtra, and persuaded all these states. And I am happy to share with you that during last 7 months, 12 states are now having their state logistics policies, and all other states and the union territories, they have planned to come out with the logistics and warehousing policies. Continuous follow-up with the states and interest and the importance felt by them will definitely give a positive direction for promotion of the warehousing in all states and different cities. Under PM Gati Shakti, there is a component of a special central assistance to states where there are funding arrangements for promotion of warehousing. Some of the states have started utilizing that window for supporting the creation of the warehouses in line with the standards. And as we go along, when the warehousing standards are finally issued as an advisory, we will request the financial institutions also for their adoption, so that ultimately all the developers, as we go along, adopt those standards, and slowly and gradually we have a network of standard warehouses in the country. In the National Master Plan, which has been developed under PM Gati Shakti, the digital platform where all form of data layers are there, under logistics chapter, we have the networking and the data layers of the warehouses. Slowly, the warehouses which have been developed in different states are getting mapped. All warehouses of CWC are mapped, FCI are mapped, and now the private sector warehouses would also be mapped to give the visibility to the users, and through the proposed integration of all the logistic digital systems through unified logistic interface platform, it is expected that there would be solutions and the applications developed which will give visibility to the users of the warehouses in different localities, and this will improve the optimum utility of the available infrastructure. I thank organizers for giving me this an opportunity. I also want to let you know that under the multimodal logistic parks being developed by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, 35 in number, and the railway cargo terminals being developed by the Ministry of Railways, and also under this special center assistance, there is definitely a push for creation of new world-class warehouses infrastructure in the country. Hopefully, with this standards, the policy support and involvement of you all, we should be able to have much more advanced and robust warehousing system in the country. I'll request you that the draft standard may be looked into by different associations, including SOCHM, and suggestions for its way forward and adoption may be shared with us so that we are able to develop a robust system. So I once again thank you all. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Meena ji, for sharing your thoughts with everyone here. I would now like to request Shri Jasjit Sethi, Chairman, National Council on Logistics, ASSOCHAM, and CEO, TCI Supply Chain, to please address the audience. Please put your hands together and welcome Shri Jasjit Sethi.
Thank you very much. Shri Meena, Shri Manoj Kumar, the colleagues on the dais, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here for this crisp conference today. I think the subject is more about the development of warehousing, so I'll keep my keynote a bit brief and try to address what we should be discussing today. I think the warehousing has come up a long way in the Indian context. Post 91, when we were just a 400 billion economy, and that time India was nowhere in the picture globally as well. We just had godowns for storage, we had plants where we had in-plant stores. And it took about 10-15 years for things to start changing in the warehousing sector. The economy started moving upwards. And the first game changer was probably the prefab structures which started to come up. And with that, one could start making very modern warehouses. Probably around the early 2000s, we had the National Building Code come up, which was actually there for a long time, but nobody looked at it. And that spoke about certain standards and stuff. Last 10-15 years, we have got quality of warehouses come up in the country now. And this sector is abuzz with a lot of investors, builders, everybody in the fray looking at this as the next golden opportunity. I will try to address 4 or 5 moot points, which I think we should be discussing about today. I think first is about the box. What a builder gives is probably a box, and what an operator does is inside the box. Both are quite distinct from each other, but at the same time, both are equally important. I think the earliest warehouses which came up in India were the Bhiwandi style, where one would cover about 60-70% of the area, and there was no way for a truck to get in and a truck to get out. Now, fortunately, people are following better norms, and not more than 40% of the land is constructed, and you have a better system of large trailers being parked. The largest trailer in India is about 22 meters, and that could also be parked in the compound and can exit and enter. Inside the box where has the main game been there? The game changed from just a stores to a vendor managed inventory to just-in-time logistics for production. I'll come to that again in a bit. And then in the aftermarket, where you had the spare parts, which was kept, to hubs and spokes of express companies, which also came only in 89. The first company to come in express cargo was in 89. And then with the advent of e-commerce, you had a lot of things changing, and you had sellers keep material near the tier 1 cities, and they would then be serviced by the platforms. This also changed over time, and now you have a dropship model. and not the early traditional model. So inside the box, 20 years ago, you couldn't put a graduate or an MBA inside a warehouse. He would run away. Today you have engineers and other people working in there. You have got ladies working in the warehouses. So the sector has come up a long way. Given that and having said that, like most commercial things, it's also about location, location, and location. And that also has got its pros and cons. What has started to happen is that people are now flocking into the similar areas, and rather than building an ecosystem, they are feeding on the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is collapsing. I'll give you cases in point. One is Bhivandi. Bhivandi is an area where everybody is making large vendor parks, but there are no roads to get out of it. That entire structure has completely collapsed, and I don't see anything happening in the next 5-10 years. There's just one bridge. Rainy season is anyway horrible. Even other times also is difficult. I think Bhivandi has probably got 25% of the nation's warehousing capacity as one location, and that's completely collapsed. And we have got wonderful buildings coming up there. It's amazing the quality of buildings coming up there. But there is no way to get in and to get out. So we need to look at as builders and others, and also as users, that where should the warehouses be? I think with India is a very tech-savvy nation. And what has happened in tech-savvy, if you look at the case in point for production logistics, people used to have in-plant stores. 30 years ago, biggest warehouses were either at CWC or they were in-plant. Now those are not there anymore, because using information of when the material is required, they're able to eliminate inventory. End of the day, sitting in a warehouse, the inventory doesn't gain in value. It is there for 3 or 4 reasons. It is there either as a hub for cargo aggregation and dissemination. It is there as an aftermarket where you can't predict when somebody will need what. So you need to keep stocks to be closer to to the market and to avoid express shipments. And third is vendor management for production. As we go along, all these with technology, they're also changing. And more companies looking at the inventory carrying cost more than just the warehousing cost. So this is an area where we need to look at the ecosystem, whether we are feeding into it or taking from it, and how technology will change what we are doing. Typically, it would be good if all these vendor parks and others are near an industrial township. Let's say that the township called Manesar out of Delhi. Now, Manesar has got many factories which require a lot of trucks coming in for material. These trucks come in from different warehouses all across, clogging the main roads. What if there was a 10-15% area demarcated in Manesar for a truck parking and logistics parks? You would not have that much traffic on the roads. It would be there inside as well. Today, a lot of crisscross happens only because wherever there's farmland, we go for a NA, and then NA is to change of land use, and we build a warehouse. We just need a connection to a road. But at all end of the day adds up to congestion. So what can be worse than having no infra? Is having too much of infra which is sub-optimized, or infra which is in wrong places, because there you have put in money and still not coming out. So that's a point of caution where I would like to park with people here. Second bit is, as the segment is growing, I've been here for a long time. I've seen warehouses in single-digit rentals, 6, 8, 10 rupees. I've seen them in the mid-teens for a long time, maybe 10, 12 years. When they went above 20, it felt like almost rupees 80 to a warehousing guy. When they touch 25, it's like, ye 100 rupees ho gaya. So what's happening is the quality of warehousing coming up, the rentals also going up very high. Now, there probably would be some kind of a ceiling till which this market can absorb that, beyond which there would be a tipping point. Already you can see e-commerce companies, they have moved from the platform to dropship to everybody becoming omni-channel. Same warehouses where you had a consumer durables company supplying to B2B is now having a D2C, which is direct to customer, warehouse inside that same warehouse, feeding to the end consumer. So slowly you will find the platforms losing its sheen, and they're coming back to the omni-channel and the brands themselves doing those sales. So over time, when these requirements tend to get aggregated, we'll look at what is the kind of a cost the industry probably can absorb. It's a great sector, and the need in the country for quality warehousing is immense. I think it's important to look at it from if it's a state or as a nation in terms of where the roadmap is going to. The roadmap has to be something where, end of the day, we don't dot up the entire countryside with all these warehouses, and then we have movement happening between them. I think there is no definite policy yet nationally of where the warehousing should be, and we build where we can. That probably because the town planning has been a bit behind than this. Normally we find that town planning comes up much later than this is going to be now industrial R zone, 15, 20 years after that. I think that is an area where we need to change as a nation. The last bit about overall ecosystem of logistics in the country. I believe as a country we are quite efficient in terms of logistics. The Indian trucker works the hardest. He's paid very low wages. We have got traffic crossing all across the country. The warehousing costs still are pretty low because you do not have so much enforcement for minimum wages in many of the warehouses, and you don't have enforcement of other statutory requirements. For example, a warehouse should have 3 air changes in an hour. It is still not enforced. I see the cost only going up. I don't see the cost coming down. With Euro 6, till Euro 6 came in 2020, nobody bought trucks. People are just buying trucks now. So another 5 years' time, when you have a Euro 6 truck, you see India went from Euro 0 in 1999 to Euro 6 in 21 years, fastest anywhere in the world. So still the trucks we are deploying are 2012, which are still Euro 2, which are cheaper trucks. When the trucks start to come to the current level of electronics, the cost is going to go up. Warehouses, as I just mentioned, you guys are pumping up the cost to 25 rupees plus. We're going to have better people working there. We've got more mechanization. The cost is going to go up. Now, there's a dichotomy. We talk about Indian cost of logistics. It's very high. With due respect, I beg to disagree with that. I believe the Indian cost of logistics is probably one of the lowest. Why? Because when we talk about percentage GDP, India's GDP is 60% services. Remaining is 40% only. So if it's 13% of the GDP, you just extrapolate that with only manufacturing and agriculture, that comes to 30%. Now, if Vikasji are going to give us 30% freight or cost logistics, we'll be very happy to take a business at 20% also. Is there anybody any person in this room who's paying more than 5-6% of logistics cost? Any industry? None would be paying. If anybody is paying more than 6%, I think there are a lot of people here in this room who can take the business. So it's not happening. But that figure comes in from somebody in 2002 who had put a figure out there that still floats. Now China is at 20%. Why? Because China has got mainly manufacturing. US is at 8%. True. Why? Because US is 79% services, 1.2% agriculture. Rest is only manufacturing. If you look at the economic survey which comes out every year, the transportation cost is 6.8% only in the country. You add the inventory carrying cost, logistics cost, other things to that, the cost of obsolescence and all that, we will not go beyond 8 and 9%. So I think it's important that we benchmark where we are, because as we put the minimum wage code also, if the code comes in for national minimum wages, the cost is going to go up in warehousing. So we need to look at things in a holistic way, that is it going to go up, is going to come down, because the remedies are going to be very different for both of them. So that's it for me. Thanks. Thank you very much, and have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now request Shri Devashish Datta, Director, Consulting and Integrated Logistics and Industrial India, JLL, to please address the audience. Since we are a little short on time, would request you, sir, to be a little brief.
So, very good morning, members on the dais and my professional colleagues in front of me. And thanks for the ASSOCHAM to giving us the opportunity to launch our thought process and our findings, our research outcomes on the Indian warehousing business. And before this, my speech, actually, all the members has talked about more or less the sectoral aspect, sectoral dependency, their future, their content and everything. as a representative of facilitator to this sector, I would like to represent this particular sector in a different way, actually. And when we talk about ASSOCHAM's topic names, we talk about leasing, investment, and development, which is probably the three main criteria and three main driver of the sector. And if we try to create a relationship between these three components, I must say this is a relation looks like hum do hamare ek. Why so? Developer and investors always looks at their return. And when we talk about return, leasing is the only parameter to evaluate. And JLL, being a property consultant, facilitate to that particular aspect only. And when we think that why leasing and what is the success driver of leasing? Leasing nothing but as a component of a consumer's preference, which we all are. And that's the reason we look at the grade A, grade B development, more specifically the organized development we look at primarily in and around major 8 cities in the country. And if we look at the number of grade A and grade B stock over last 5 years, we have a very significant growth, which is probably the more than the growth of various other sectors and very other promising areas of development. We also look at, actually envisage a constant growth in the grade A development, which is predominantly the standardization what we are talking about in this forum. The organized investment, organized money, institutional investors' participations and all. But when we talk about the occupancy part, the users part, we look at around 60% of this stock is actually occupied by organized 3PL players and e-com players, which is driven by consumers only. So now we think from that perspective and we start thinking our research report that how and what are the drivers of these sectors and what is future and what is the current trend what we're looking at. Couple of all the details and all the information, it is in our research paper. I hope it will be an informative one for all of you. I'm just trying to touch upon couple of points. First point is basically the global investment, what we actually discussed. Global investment, if we take a reference of 2020 and 2021 from the global investment, institutional investment perspective from all the sectors, what we find around from 2% to 20% jump in the warehousing segment. And that jump is basically because of the opportunity associated or lies in the sector and the future return perspective. Now, from that part, from an institutional investor's perspective, scale is the most important part. And that scale actually we have experienced in terms of the scale of development. Earlier it is around, Mr. Shukla actually mentioned this particular point, the cubic meter or cubic feet kind of a development concept where height is one of the key criteria for development. Second is the scale of square feet. It is basically when we talk about early probably decades ago, it is only 1 lakh square feet is probably the highest one we can think of. Now we can think of an 1 million square feet box in a development like this. Now the third point is the transformation of the sector into the positioning of customers' orientation. We actually identify e-commerce delivery players like all the major e-com players. They start thinking delivery of consumers' product, consumers' preference is a defined timeline. And that creates an opportunity to create alternative warehousing spaces, which is predominantly can be termed as an urban logistics sector or urban warehousing segment. Groceries, agriculture, pharmacy, fashion retails, FMCDs are the key commodities which drive this urban urban warehouse space in the Tier 1 cities. Now coming last point is the omni-channel part. We already discussed this thing. It's basically the experience of product from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional, and that's the concept what we are looking at or what the industry is looking at to attract consumers, not only presenting the cargo, not only presenting the commodity which they are trying to sell from their platform, but also to experience the product in within their warehouse boxes. Now, a couple of future trends we mentioned in our report, but the trend is continue to be a global investment, organized investment, industrial, global or world's best practices in the logistics sector, which actually facilitate people or users to evaluate product, evaluate warehouse space into a different dimension with respect to their efficiency and operational hassle-freeness within the box system. We also think of a sustainability. Why sustainability is important? Because apart from the social and the environmental part, sustainability is important to consider investors' investment on a depreciable asset. It is a future objective where you have a clear exit platform where you can think of a sustainable development which can continue to be used probably next 20-25 years kind of period. Sorry. Now, specialized storage, specialized warehouse. We talk about dry warehouses without kind of an environment sensitiveness. We currently look at, or probably our sector need, a specialized warehouse space like cold storage, rail link logistic facilities, MMLPs, what we already discussed and mentioned from the government and government policies and promotions things. So cold storage is another segment which we can actually look at probably in near future, which is going to be more organized and more developed. And fourth one is the market place. Warehouse is something like it is not really dependent on the FSI, which is probably one of all the developers' key fundamental understanding that it is doesn't matter what the FSI is. It's all about the square feet. But the increasing trend in the land cost, increasing trend in the warehousing cost, development cost, construction cost, operation cost, probably it is time to consider a multi-storied warehouse boxes. This is because in real estate, JLL can think of a single-storied bungalow to multi-storied 100-storied building just because of to capture the efficiency on the land cost. And the moment we think this increasing trend in land and construction cost, probably we can think of a situation where in coming years we can actually explore the multi-storied building in the warehouse segment. So other points we already discussed, we already shared in our report. The findings, the detailing, what we have is basically from our ground understanding of 1 lakh plus global employees in different segments and real estate findings, and our 80 cities global footprint, global experience from the sector and the knowledge and the understanding. So JLL being a facilitator, we always love to facilitate to all our stakeholders, including the government as well as the private investors, developers, occupiers and all that. And thank you very much for listening me to allowing me to share my thoughts and understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I would request Shri Hitendra Mehta, Co-Chair, National Council on SEZs, Industrial Parks and Warehousing, Assam, to please give the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am. At the outset, being a co-chairman of the National Council on Special Economic Zone, Industrial Parks and Warehousing, along with my fellow chairman of National Council on Logistics, Shri Jasjit Sethi ji, welcome all of you to this event. I think lots of good things have been said about warehousing sector and the potential it holds. Sir, I think this is very well justified from the fact that the number which our panelist Anesh Shukla ji shared, the kind of potential warehousing sector holds, and that is also supported by the kind of the people who are present in this hall. On a sector like warehousing, we have jam-packed hall. That shows that the kind of interest that is there in this particular sector. As all of us, are aware, to instill confidence of the investors, we need some sort of credible policy or credible legislation so that investors are aware that there should be a stable policy available for them and there should not be any midway changes of the rules in between. As pointed out by our special guest Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar ji about the Warehousing Development Regulation Bill, and just to share with you to further instill the confidence amongst the investors, Warehousing Development Regulation Amendment Bill 2002 is already listed in the ongoing session of the Parliament. So I think we can expect some good things for this warehousing sector if the bill is passed in this ongoing session. And very pertinently, we heard about the warehousing and logistic policies being adopted by different states, as pointed out by Shri Amrit Meena ji, Special Secretary DPIIT, and our chief guest of the day. I think, sir, once these things are there in place, then only we can expect the warehousing sector to really take off rather. So my limited role here is to, propose vote of thanks, considering that we have already surpassed our time, exceeded our time, so much so we have actually exceeded the time of the tea break as well. So I will not take much time. Would like to quickly just propose a very hearty vote of thanks to our chief guest, Shri Amritlal Meena ji. We had an occasion to meet him last week only in his office. The kind of reception he extended to us, the kind of warmth he extended to us, to our delegation, SOCHM delegation, it is really heartwarming, sir. We are indeed privileged, I must say. And I can assure all of you that our voice will be heard when we go as a chamber with our suggestions and representations. And just, I'm taking this opportunity, sir. We had in May 2022 our meeting of our council. One issue was coming up about movers regulation, which have been implemented, manufacturing and other operations in warehousing. So the industry's concern is that different guidelines are being adopted by different ports. If some central guidelines could be issued insofar as the implementation of movers regulations are concerned, so that will be great benefit to the industry, sir. And very much grateful to Shri T.K. Manoj Kumar ji, Chairman of Warehousing Development and Regulatory Authority. Since he is there as a regulator, that actually goes to just support this intention of the government, that government is very, very serious about this sector, and they have a separate regulator, they have a separate industry friend available to support and to take note of your concern and address those concerns. And my special thanks to our other panelist, Shri Anesh Shukla ji, who is Chief Customer Officer of Welspun Logistic Parks, Shri Devashit Datta, Director Consulting with JLL, and I, along with my fellow chairman, Jasjit ji, extend very hearty vote of thanks to all of you in the end. And with this, we call this session to close. And I think I'll hand it over to the organizers for further proceedings. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Big thank you to all our esteemed dignitaries on stage for coming here. Big round of applause for our dignitaries on stage. Thank you all for joining us. We will now take a short break. We'll take a tea break. Since we are running late, we'll keep it short. We'll be back in 15 minutes. All of you are welcome to please bring your tea cups, your coffee cups on the table so that we can make up for the time we've lost. We'll see you soon. When you come back, we'll talk about the key trends in the warehousing sector.